Under the blistering sun of the desert, Officer Mark Davis squinted against the harsh light, his wrists raw and aching from the chains binding him to the wooden post. His uniform was damp with sweat, and the oppressive heat was almost unbearable. The last vestiges of hope he'd clung to were beginning to wane, replaced by a sinking feeling of despair. He inhaled sharply, trying to calm his racing heart, but every sound sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. The rustling of the dry brush, the distant howl of the wind, it all felt like a harbinger of something ominous. He couldn't remember how long he'd been here, trapped in this desolate expanse, but he knew he couldn't stay much longer without help. Suddenly, he heard the unmistakable sound of paws pounding against the parched earth. It was a rhythmic cadence that drew nearer, and instinctively, his heart leapt with a mix of hope and dread. It could be help, or it could be his captors returning. Mark strained to listen, and his stomach churned when he recognized the barking that belonged to K-9 units he knew well. As the dogs emerged from the shimmering heat haze, his breath caught in his throat. 3 German shepherds, intelligent, fierce, and trained for action, bounded toward him with purpose. One of them, a familiar face named Rex, was prominently highlighted by a red circle drawn in his mind, the dog he had trained himself, a symbol of loyalty and courage. Mark felt a rush of relief, mixed with disbelief. They must have been sent by his fellow officers after he had gone missing. "Rex, here, boy," he yelling over the din of yapping. His voice felt hoarse, almost foreign to him. The lead dog hesitated for a moment, nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of his handler. Mark's heart raced as the other 2 dogs flanked Rex, their eyes wide and ears perked up. But then, the joy of potential rescue was quickly overshadowed by the realization that he was still chained, vulnerable. Would they be able to act in time? Would someone find him before whatever was hunting him returned? He scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of life beyond the suffocating heat. Panic clawed at him again as the barking abruptly ceased, the dogs halting in their tracks just feet away from him. Rex stood rigid, his body tense, eyes locked on something Mark couldn't see. "What's wrong, Rex?" Mark called out, desperation thickening his voice. But Rex didn't respond, his focus fixed on the distant dunes that shimmered ominously under the scorching sun. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Mark saw a shadow moving stealthily across the desert floor. The panic surged forward again. Someone was approaching. He strained against the chains, as if motivation alone could free him. Rex barked sharply, snapping Mark's attention. The dogs shifted, forming a protective circle around him, primal instincts igniting. Mark's pulse quickened further as the figure drew closer, wearing a dark coat that contrasted starkly against the bright desert sand. Well, what do we have here?" The voice was smooth yet cold, sending shivers down Mark's spine. With a sickening realization, he recognized the figure from his past encounters, one of the leaders of an underground smuggling ring he'd been investigating. "Didn't think you'd hold out this long, Officer Davis," the man sneered, reveling in his power. "But look at you now, chained and helpless, surrounded by your loyal friends. They won't do you any good here." Mark felt a chill run down his spine as the reality of his situation sank in. He was outnumbered and outmatched. The dogs were fierce, but they were still just animals, and he was helpless in this makeshift prison. "You won't get away with this," he shouted, trying to project confidence. "Get away with what?" The man shot back, brushing aside Mark's defiance. "You'll be forgotten soon enough. I just need a little more time to finish my work here. And by the time anyone finds you, it'll be too late." Mark's mind raced, searching for a plan, any plan, as the thrill of adrenaline rushed through him. Time was slipping away, and each second felt like an eternity. The dogs whined softly, sensing his distress, but he couldn't give in. He had to do something, anything, to buy himself time or create a diversion. "Rex, go," he commanded suddenly, his voice firm. Rex stared at him, seemingly understanding the urgency behind the words. "Find help, boy. Get them here." The lead dog hesitated, glancing back before looking at the man closing in. Mark saw the flicker of instinct in Rex's eyes. He wouldn't abandon his handler. Slowly, the strength of that bond surged between them, and Mark knew he had to take a chance.
Go.
Now, he shouted again, desperation lacing every word. Rex finally turned and took off, racing into the vast expanse of the desert, ears pinned back and speed unmatched. Your precious pup won't make it far, the man hissed, the amusement in his voice clear. I wouldn't count on rescue anytime soon. But Mark felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Rex could reach help. Perhaps, just perhaps, he could still get out of this alive. As the world narrowed around him, the stakes rose with every passing moment. With the shadowy figure drawing ever closer, Mark faced the reality of his impending fate. He couldn't afford to be overwhelmed by fear. He would not give up. He would fight for his freedom and those who believed in him. And with that determination burning within him, he resolved to maintain his composure, waiting for the right moment to strike back against his captor. In the swirling dust of the desert, against all odds, the tension thickened, and the battle for survival had just begun. The figure loomed closer, the heat radiating from the desert floor distorting the man's features into something nearly monstrous. Mark's breath quickened, his mind racing to formulate a plan amidst the chaos of his gnarled emotions. He wasn't about to let fear dictate his fate. Why don't you just give up, officer? The man taunted, his voice dripping with condescension. You're in no position to resist. Those dogs are nothing but untrained mutts without a leash. Mark gritted his teeth, willing himself to stay calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Rex wouldn't abandon him. He'd trust in his training, in the bond they shared. He had to believe that his K9 would find help and return in time. Do you really think your little stunt with Rex is going to work? The man laughed, a cruel sound that danced maliciously on the wind. By the time your friends realize you're gone, it will be far too late. Keeping his gaze locked on the approaching figure, Mark forced himself to think past the man's words. He scanned his surroundings, desperate for anything he could use. The wooden post that held him captive looked sturdy, a chance to use his weight to his advantage. If he could leverage the chains and create just enough slack. Mark felt the dogs shift restlessly behind him, their instincts sensing the imminent danger. He could nearly hear Rex barking in encouragement, his companion's loyalty pushing him forward. Stay ready, guys, he whispered under his breath as he shifted his weight against the post. The man stepped closer, a shadow casting over Mark like a curtain of impending doom. You look exhausted. How long can you hold out? Let's make it fun. I'll give you one chance to untie yourself before I make you regret crossing me. Mark sensed the threat in his words, his heart pounding louder than ever. Each second brimmed with a palpable tension, and he knew he had to act quickly. The only opportunity for escape would come if he could surprise the man when he least expected it. Listen, I don't need to untie myself to deal with you. Mark shot back, shifting his weight more deliberately now as he wrestled with the chains, pulling at his wrists. You're the one who's about to make a mistake. The man leaned in, intrigued yet unconvinced. Oh, what could a desperate cop possibly do in a situation like this? It's rather pathetic, really. In that moment, everything clicked into place. Mark feigned weakness as he leaned heavily against the post, making it seem as if he was on the brink of collapse. Drawing on what remained of his strength, he threw his body weight against the crude wooden structure, rocking it violently. The chains rattled, excitement flooding through his veins as he felt the chains loosen briefly. Mark took that moment of surprise. It was just enough to give him a spark of hope. You know, you want to take me lightly, but I've dealt with scum like you before, Mark replied, mustering confidence as he swung his foot against the base of the pole, the sudden force causing the post to teeter dangerously. The man's grin faltered, awareness dawning on his face as he took a step back, unease creeping into his demeanor. Just then, Rex, having sensed the change, charged forward, barking furiously, the other two dogs following suit. The ferocity in their barks reverberated against the backdrop of the endless desert, and the man's composure slipped further. Mark saw his chance. Now, Rex, he shouted. With a powerful lunge, he pushed against the post one last time, forcing it to tilt more sharply. His wrists strained, but in that moment, he felt the chains give just enough for him to slide his hands free as the post clattered backward, hitting the ground with a resounding thud. "Not so easy now, huh?" Mark said, twisting around and sprinting toward the man, who stumbled back, eyes widened in shock. Rex barked again, leaping forward to protect his handler, while the other dogs growled deeply, giving Mark the confidence he needed. Mark moved swiftly, adrenaline surging through him. He reached for the man, determined to restrain him before he could react. The man, realizing the predicament, attempted to regain his footing, but it was too late. Mark lunged at him, catching him off guard and delivering a swift blow to his gut. "Get back!" Mark shouted at the man, who crumpled to the ground. The dogs surrounded him, barking insistently, ready to protect their handler. For a moment, victory surged within Mark. He felt the thrill of reclaiming control, but then he remembered he wasn't safe yet. "All right, Rex, we need to get out of here," he urged, scanning the horizon for any signs of his backup. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the sand, and he could almost feel the weight of time pressing down on him again. He turned back to the man, who was still gasping for air, fury etched across his features. "Do you really think this is over?" The man spat, shooting daggers from his eyes. "You've only delayed the inevitable." "I'm not the one who's delayed," Mark countered, his voice even as he caught sight of movement on the horizon. He squinted against the fading light, heart racing. There, he saw the faint outline of vehicles kicking up dust. "Backup's here," he realized, adrenaline flooding through him anew. "And they're not here to play games." As Mark turned to make a break for it, he felt an unrelenting grip on his arm, a last-ditch attempt by the man that nearly caused him to stumble. In a flash of instinct, Mark pivoted and delivered a swift kick that sent the man sprawling once more, the opportunity to flee too tempting to resist. With Rex and the other shepherds on high alert, he dashed toward the approaching vehicles, fleeting seconds ticking away rapidly. His heart raced louder than the pounding of the dog's paws behind him. Come on," Mark urged as they approached the vehicles, relief flooding him with every stride. Safety, support, and strength, right within reach. But just as he neared the vehicles, a sickening realization sank deep. The shadows they cast were not just figures of hope, and the sense of danger still churned ominously in the pit of his stomach. He glanced back one last time, catching a glimpse of the man rising from the sand, a twisted smile creeping across his lips as something glinted in his hand. Something sharp, something dangerous. "We're not done yet, Officer Davis," the man bellowed, and for a moment, Mark felt his stomach drop at the foreboding promise hidden in those words. Mark turned back to the vehicles, the tension thickening, promising that the true battle for survival had only just begun. Mark's heart raced as he darted toward the approaching vehicles, panic pushing him forward as the growing ominous voice of his captor echoed in his mind. The man was not finished. The fight was far from over. Behind him, the dogs remained vigilant, their muscles tensed as they sensed the danger lurking just a heartbeat away. The brown dust kicked up by the tires of the approaching SUVs churned in the air, swirling in chaotic patterns that mirrored the turmoil inside Mark. Where were his fellow officers? Did they know about the threat he faced? He risked a glance back once more, but the shadowy figure was already scrambling to his feet, the glint of a knife flashing menacingly in the waning light.
"Mark."
"Over here," a voice shouted from one of the vehicles, jolting him from his moment of uncertainty. It was Officer Amy Carter, a trusted partner and skilled K-9 handler. She had arrived with backup. "Get out of there," Mark yelled back, urgency bleeding into his voice. He couldn't let the man catch up. "He's armed." Mark felt heat rising in his chest, a mix of fear for his life and danger to his team. He pushed every ounce of willpower into his legs, running harder, adrenaline propelling him forward. Rex and the other German shepherds remained close, instinctively matching his speed, growling ferociously at the man behind them. The vehicles skidded to a stop a mere few feet away, officers pouring out with an energy that burned with determination. Mark felt a renewed wave of hope wash over him, But the looming threat of the man behind them was a chilling reminder that salvation had not yet arrived.
Mark.
What's going on? Amy shouted as she unholstered her weapon, her eyes darting between him and the advancing figure. Don't let him get close. He's dangerous. Mark shouted back, urging her to act quickly. His breath came in ragged gasps as he glanced over his shoulder one more time and saw the man picking himself up again, the knife still gleaming wickedly in his hand. Okay, let's take him down. Amy barked, signaling the other officers to cover her as she moved forward, weapon raised. Wait, Mark called, realizing that moving in too quickly might provoke the man further. He's unpredictable. We need to approach strategically. But before he could say another word, the man lunged forward, chaos erupting as he charged through the desert towards them. His movements were desperate and erratic, fueled by a twisted sense of revenge. In that moment, Mark's instinct kicked in, and he yelled, "Rex, intercept!" The German shepherd sprinted ahead, a streak of fur and determination. He leaped into the air, tackling the man to the ground, knocking the knife from his hand before they both tumbled into the dirt. The threat had shifted, and Mark could see his opening. Police!
Get down.
Amy shouted, her voice commanding as she took aim. Mark's heart raced, but with Rex now grappling with the man, they needed to act fast. Using the distraction created, Mark rushed forward. He hadn't felt this alive in days, the rush of adrenaline guiding his every movement as he reached for the man still struggling beneath Rex's weight. The man managed to roll over, his fury palpable, eyes wild with madness. You think this is a victory, Davis? You will regret this. His voice dripped with venom, but Mark ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. With a swift motion, Mark pinned the man down, arms pressing against the sand to keep him restrained. Rex growled, keeping his teeth bared, ready to protect his handler as Mark reached for his handcuffs, still clipped to his belt. Get him, Mark! Amy shouted, moving in with another officer to provide backup. In a tense second, Mark secured the man's wrists, cuffing him tightly. You're under arrest for multiple charges, he declared, his voice firm. The fight had shifted, and for a moment, he allowed himself a sense of triumph. But just as that breeze of victory washed over him, the man snarled and kicked backward, using his long legs to push Mark away. The sudden movement sent Mark sprawling to the side, but Rex was already back on the offense, snapping at the man with fierce determination. Stay down, Amy yelled, firing a warning shot into the air, the sound cracking like thunder through the desert. Those moments felt like chaos, a slick dance of motion and sound, with each officer holding their ground firmly, eyes focused on the unraveling situation. Do you think you can take me in? The man spat, struggling beneath Rex. I know people, more than you could imagine. You think I won't get out of this? Mark, wiping sweat from his brow, felt determination reignite within him. You may know people, but you're not getting away this time. The law is going to catch up with you, and I'm not scared of your threats. With more officers arriving to assist, they quickly surrounded the scene, weapons drawn, creating an impenetrable circle around the conflict. Amy moved to secure the man's feet. Their teamwork had always been a tight-knit fabric of unity and trust, but this moment tested their resolve. Mark, Amy suddenly called out, pulling him from his thoughts. Watch out. Mark turned just in time to see the man launch himself sideways, elbowing Rex and dislodging the dog just long enough to wiggle free. In one swift motion, he rose up, his eyes frenzied and desperate. Rex quickly recovered, but it was clear the man was making a break for it. Stop! Police! Mark shouted, bolting after him, instinctively guiding Rex with a gesture. The suspect dashed through the dust, bounding away from the vehicles and deeper into the barren landscape. Mark's legs pumped hard beneath him, racing against the setting sun that painted the sky with fiery hues. There was no time to waste. This could end badly if they didn't catch him soon. Stay close, Rex. Mark commanded as they chased the man, adrenaline propelling them forward in a blur of brown and gray. The man zigged and zagged, trying to lose them in the undulating dunes, but Mark was relentless, his mind set on stopping him. You're not getting away again. He pushed himself harder, heart pounding enough to drown out the fear creeping in. Rex surged ahead, utilizing his training and instincts, and Mark tightly focused on the sight of the man's fleeing figure. Just as he thought victory was slipping away again, Rex lunged forward, snapping at the man's heel and causing him to trip over his own feet. With a gasp, the man fell, hitting the ground hard. Before he could rise again, Mark was upon him, bringing back every ounce of strength he could muster. This time, he couldn't let it slip away. "Rex, hold him," he shouted, and the dog obediently leaped onto the suspect's back, pinning him down. Mark quickly resecured the handcuffs, this time without hesitation. "You're finished," he said through gritted teeth, looking the man squarely in the eyes, unwavering. As he finally caught his breath, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The moment had been chaotic, but they had prevailed. The desert sky glowed as it embraced twilight, a beautiful contrast to the struggle that had unfolded. Mark stood tall, heart racing not only from the chase, but from the renewed sense of purpose rippling through him. Rex panted beside him, pride emanating from the loyal companion who had stayed by his side through everything. With help finally arriving and the shadows of the desert fading into night, Mark turned to watch as officers approached, ready to take over. He had narrowly escaped a dark fate, but in that moment, he felt a sense of satisfaction in knowing he had faced down the threat and survived. Yet he still couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a reminder that danger often lurked just beneath the surface, and the true test of courage was still ahead. As the last traces of sunlight slipped beneath the horizon, the desert air transformed, cooling into an evening chill that sent shivers down Mark's spine. He glanced back at the man still lying on the ground, shackled and sputtering in frustration, while Rex stood guard, his eyes sharp and alert. Relief washed over Mark, but it was tinged with an undercurrent of unease. He had faced danger today, and though victory felt sweet, he knew this was only a chapter in an unfolding story. The officers converged around them, weapons lowered but ready, the dust swirling lazily around their boots. Amy approached, her face a mixture of relief and urgency. "You all right? We heard shots fired. Was it you?" "I'm good," Mark replied, catching his breath. "But it could have gone sideways pretty quickly. He's tougher than he looks, and he knows more than he's letting on." He nodded back toward the man, who was still struggling against Rex, a fire of defiance burning in his eyes. "Let's get him processed," Amy said, signaling to two officers to assist her as she went about checking the suspect for any hidden weapons or items he might still have. "We need to find out who he's working with, if anyone. This guy isn't just some random criminal." As they cuffed the man and hoisted him grudgingly to his feet, Mark felt a sense of urgency wash over him. He had seen the flicker of cunning in the man's eyes, the trapped animal instinct that made him dangerous. "You have no idea how many enemies you've made today," the man said sneeringly, glaring at Mark. "You think this ends here? I have a network that you could never comprehend. You're just a cog in a much larger wheel." Mark exchanged a look with Amy, a silent understanding passing between them. This was not merely about one man. Something larger loomed in the shadows. "We'll see about that," Mark replied steadily, his voice strong. "You're going away for a long time, and I intend to uncover every last aspect of this operation." As they placed the man in the back of a police vehicle, Mark couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that this was merely the surface of something dark and deep-rooted. The desert, which had only hours before felt a world apart, now loomed large with secrets, and the thought that they had merely scratched the surface made him anxious. Once the suspect was secured and the vehicles revved to life, Mark climbed into the passenger seat of Amy's SUV, Rex settling on the floor between them. He felt the warmth of the dog's presence, a stabilizing force amidst the bruise of uncertainty. "You did well today, buddy," he sighed, running his hand over Rex's fur. The dog wagged his tail in response, a comforting reminder that some things never changed. "Let's get back to the station," Amy said, her voice firm yet softening with camaraderie. "We need to strategize. If he has accomplices, they'll be on the lookout. We can't let them slip from our grasp." Mark nodded, determination igniting within him. And that's not the only thing we need to address. If there's a wider network involved, we need to gather intelligence quietly. We can't tip them off. As they drove the winding roads back towards town, images of the confrontation flashed in Mark's mind. He felt the weight of responsibility hang heavily over him, realizing they were chasing more than just a deranged criminal. The man had hinted at a larger web, a narrative that spoke not only of violence, but of deeper layers of crime that extended beyond their desert landscape. Think he's involved in anything bigger? Amy asked, glancing over at Mark, the tension of their earlier exchange still palpable. Definitely, Mark acknowledged, focusing on the road ahead. We need to dig into his history, see if he's connected to larger trafficking rings or organized crime. I have a feeling this isn't the last we've seen of him. The headlights of a nearby vehicle illuminated the dark road as night fell over the desert. Mark's thoughts were relentless. He knew the fight wasn't over. They had merely pushed back one adversary tonight. There were threads to untangle, connections to chase, and a looming criminal organization that would not dissolve quietly. As they reached the station, the bright lights greeted them like a beacon of hope amid uncertainty. But in Mark's heart lingered a weight, the knowledge that they were embarking on a more profound battle. This singular event had unlocked the door to bigger, more treacherous pathways. Once inside, the hum of officers and the frantic shuffling of paperwork swirled around him. They had quickly shifted from the adrenaline of pursuit to the meticulous work that must follow. He could feel the camaraderie and tension intermingling in every word exchanged, each report filed thick with the weight of anticipation. With a nod from Amy, Mark joined the huddle of detectives gathered around a conference table. This man knows more than he's letting on, he began, looking around at the gathering of focused faces, burning with a collective purpose. We need full intel on his connections, and we need to act before he makes a call or tip-off. If he has a network, they could be tracking us right now. Let's pull his history, see if he's been linked to any prior incidents, one officer suggested, already typing information into the waiting database. Agreed, Mark said, feelers extended toward uncovering the truth. We bring our best resources to this. I don't want to underestimate him, not after today. Time flowed faster in the station amidst the urgency of purpose. Conversations crackled with energy, and officers moved with an electric conviction. Mark immersed himself in data, cross-referencing leads and patterns, poring over files that held the key to unraveling a much larger threat. Hours passed as they worked tirelessly, the rhythm of the night punctuated only by the tapping of keyboards and low murmurs of strategizing colleagues. Mark felt the adrenaline still thrumming through his veins as he searched each name that connected to their suspect. The clock ticked on, shadows lengthening in the corners of the room, but there was no time to halt for weariness. Finally, as the fingers on the clock crossed into the early morning hours, a breakthrough ignited the room. We found something, an officer announced, excitement lacing their voice. He has ties to several organized crime families, and there's chatter suggesting he may be orchestrating a shipment that could be big. This might explain his desperation today. The web is thicker than we thought, Amy remarked, her eyes sharp with resolve. If he's working with traffickers, they might be directly tied to our recent cases. Mark felt the realization settle like a weight at his core. They were gaining momentum, but it was a dangerous game they were playing. As pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, he felt the churning in his gut tighten, a mix of hope and foreboding, for they were about to step into something much larger than just their lives. Prepare a raid team, Mark commanded firmly, the determination in his voice drawing the focus of the room. We need to watch for any movements on this shipment. If we're right, they'll make a move soon, and we need to be ready to intercept before it spirals out of control. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter, one replete with uncertainty and resolve, an unfolding story of shadows and chase, a pursuit not just for justice, but for the safety of their community as a harbinger of the deeper battles to come. The echoes of their earlier confrontation with the man reverberated within him, sharpened by the urgency of the larger fight ahead. And deep down, buried in the recesses of Mark's heart, lingered a hope that they could not only uncover the truth behind today's turmoil, but bring light to a darkness that threatened to consume them all. As the team mobilized, his gaze fell on Rex, who glanced back with unwavering loyalty, and Mark took a breath, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Together, they'd see this through.